As Tom lights our chalice this morning, a symbol of our faith, I invite you to speak aloud in the affirmation in our order of service here. Love is the doctrine of this church, and the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, for these high purposes do we unite in worship.
My friends and partners in our collective but very individually unique quest for truth and meaning, perhaps we have come to it. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to reflect on the remarkable series of homilies that have constituted this year's summer series. We started the series with the understanding that we are addressing a very complex topic. Wendell Berry said, "We've lived our lives by the assumption that what was good for us would be good for the world. We've been wrong. We must change our lives so that it will be possible to live by the contrary assumption that what is good for the world will be good for us. And that requires that we make the effort to know the world and to learn what is good for it." So in this series, we wanted to provide the opportunity for education, personal reflection, and dialogue on how we respond to what could be the most important existential question humanity has faced. Will our species survive? My task today is to attempt some integration of the things we've heard over the past 7 weeks. And maybe as I do so, you'll reflect on what you've learned from the series as well, and consider how this set of experiences has landed with you. We've heard some extraordinary individuals this summer, all from our Durango hometown, some members of this church. We gained new perspectives, learned practical suggestions for making changes towards a healthier planet, began to see the ethical imperatives undergirding the climate crisis. Dick White, Heidi Stelzer, Stephen Guy, Mary Alkin, and Darcy Hitchcock brought their unique experiences, perspectives to our thinking about climate change. Each one helped us face important truths about the existential crisis of climate change, but they also pointed us toward directions that we could take on our own individually and collectively to mitigate negative effects and build towards a better and sustainable future. Let me propose an overlying idea that fits the fact that we're having this conversation in a church. That our individual and collective approach to the climate crisis is in fact a spiritual endeavor. Only if we elevate our responses to the environmental crisis to a spiritual journey can we keep our sanity. It's through our spiritual strength that we'll be able to have and keep the capacity required to avoid despair and resignation and find health and meaning through action and hope. Right from the beginning of the series, Dick talked about environmental work as a moral imperative. Darcy, last week, reminded us that there's a spiritual toll to a divided self, meaning the extent to which we act in ways that are antithetical to what we know is true. Dick and Mary both referred to our personal reflection and mindful awareness as steps that can increase our awareness of that division. And minimizing that division, however we do it, is spiritual work. So let me remind us about a few points our presenters brought to us. In addition to helping us look through the lens of moral imperative, Dick encouraged us to be more mindful in our awareness of environmental concerns and asked us to share them with others, build local political action for change. Heidi called climate change a super wicked problem with layers of complexity, but also layers of possibilities available to us for making positive change. At Pine Song, she gave us a well-thought-out workbook to reflect on and build our personal climate change action plan. I brought additional copies of the presentation as well as some copies of the workbook, which are on the back balcony back there. If you didn't get one, or if you want to review that or take one home, they're available. Stephen helped us to see that we can have a radically beneficial impact on climate change, perhaps also on our health, by making changes in our diet to consume less meat and eat more plant-based food. Mary continued with the mindfulness theme, but added a Buddhist perspective that supports our effort to remain unattached to specific results while taking some of the many small ethical actions that cumulatively add up. Darcy shared her experience of growing into her environmental calling. She presented 4 natural steps to sustain that serve as simple guidelines. 1, don't take something out of the earth if it causes problems. 2, don't make things that won't decompose. 3, don't take away stuff you're using faster than it can be replaced naturally. And don't take away what communities need in order to live. Each of these highlights is just the tip of the iceberg for the depth that each of the presenters shared. Remember, all of our worship services are recorded and posted on our website, so you can go there if you missed one of the series, or to listen again if you want to be reminded and maybe deepen your understanding. These 5 individuals share a common passion, which I think they hope is contagious, doing what they can to preserve and protect our one Blue Boat home. And while they brought unique views and ideas to our ways of thinking about how to preserve and protect the earth, our Blue Boat home, their stories and perspectives wove together to create a picture of opportunity and potential that, if we individually and collectively bring our time, talent, desire, and resources, we all can contribute to doing this work. And that's where we must draw on a spiritual core to sustain our ability to make good choices and seize opportunities. Because we're choosing each day whether to look, and if we choose to look, to act or to turn away. Spiritual growth involves learning and leaning into those things that create meaning and purpose, being awake, being conscious beyond the ordinary and routine. These times are anything but routine, and even if it's inconvenient and frustrating, they require more than ordinary intention and action if we're to change the environmental direction towards health and sustainability. So, how do we do this? An important way in which to ground ourselves spiritually for this task is to turn to and build from our values and principles and frame our response with that lens. We don't ask if it's easy to recognize and respect the individual worth and dignity of every being, or to see that every action that we take affects the interdependent web of existence of which we are all a part, or to use the democratic process in our congregation and in our society, or any of the other 7 principles that undergird our UU faith. We know that the work of changing long-held patterns of behavior and thinking is hard, and progress is difficult at times, especially for those of us who have been around a while. Yet, as we affirm and act on these principles, they increasingly become part of who we are. And the relief and benefit is that we don't have to attempt to live these principles alone. We commit to support each other in doing so. We learn from each other as we approach dealing with the super wicked problem in our multiple different ways. That's why we come together to worship, to learn, to explore, to play, because we know we need each other to make real our greatest hopes. And that's how we'll keep our sanity. We join our hands and hearts to face the climate crisis clear-eyed and stronger together. I don't have to know everything to do something. You don't have to know everything to do something either. There's no right way, but there's a lot of them. And as each of us does our something, we collectively turn the tide. So let me remind you of a few of the practical somethings that we heard from our speakers this summer. Eat more legumes. Buy green power. Buy carbon offsets. So this is a little bit of a shameless plug for the 4 Core Carbon Offset Fund. I just went to Telluride and back $5.40 to offset that trip. Invest your money in banks that support sustainability industries. Talk to other people about environmental concerns and the actions that you're taking. You might find more commonality than you think. Call or write your congressional representatives about making environmentally healthy decisions. Support solar. Pay attention. Decrease consumption. We heard 3 R's in the story. How about some other R's that are really Re's? Refuse, rethink, reduce, repair, refurbish, repurpose, reuse, recycle. They're all in there. I'm encouraged by the increasing attention and creative focus on potential environmental solutions that's happening all over. There's a great many smart and concerned people across the world, and I think that number is increasing as events that are predicted from the various climate sciences are occurring sooner and more intensely than expected. These people are attacking all different parts of the problem. And it's easy to find websites that address solving that problem. Darcy's Good News You Wanted is an example of that. I see many encouraging signs that the world is moving increasingly and aggressively towards a climate-neutral future. I choose to pay attention to these as opposed to those that promote doom and gloom to keep my hope and spirits up. I celebrate the Inflation Reduction Act, otherwise known as the best environmental act in our history, that was just signed by President Biden. While it's far from perfect or complete, it makes me hopeful that we have a sustainable beginning to make significant gains nationally and systemically to reduce our country's contribution of greenhouse gases, and, by the way, showing international leadership that I think we should. We celebrate and are grateful for these hopeful signs, but we can't let our attention wander from both doing what we can do and advocating with our elected leaders to continue to act with urgency to protect the planet. That leads me to my final thought. It may seem a bit off track for this, but I believe is highly relevant and critical to this conversation. If we don't preserve our democracy, we'll be severely hampered in our ability to preserve our planet. I think this is another super wicked problem. Here's a truth that I saw this week in a blog. It's a good blog, Chop Wood, Carry Water by Jessica Craven. She said, the rise or fall of our democracy will have global consequences. Should it end, the repercussions will leave no one untouched. We can flee to another country, but we won't be able to escape the devastating climate consequences, the emboldening of strong men everywhere, the increased danger to marginalized communities, the weakening of democracy in every stronghold. We're not just fighting for our country, in other words. We're fighting to save the world as we know it. Never has it been more important that we be as politically astute as possible and that we vote with fierce determination for ethical, responsible leaders who believe in a democratic form of government. So, 2 more important things we learned from this series that we can do: engage in local and national political action. There's all kinds of opportunities. The vote is certainly one of them. Vote for political leaders who fight for climate change. The good news is I think we know pretty much what to do. Maybe the challenge is to find the spiritual will to do it. Faith is action born of spirituality, actions taken despite fear and uncertainty, despite the feeling that we're too small, the problem's too big, the scale of change is too immense. We can all make small, not unimportant differences in our individual actions that together combine to make a difference. Dan Rather, in his blog Steady, reminds us of the value of a commitment to collective action, rallying around bottom-up activism, a recognition that there have been specific strategies ordinary people have used to change legal and social structures that are worse than today's. This is the language of action and hope that taps into a deep vein of popular movements that have propelled our growth as a nation, the words of our founding documents, to a society more aligned with those lofty ideals. My family members are fans of the J.R.R. Tolkien books, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Some of you may like those too. In this story, the wizard Gandalf and the humble hobbit Frodo are having, and he's taking a long and difficult but necessary journey that seems far beyond him. And they have this conversation. Frodo tells Gandalf, "I wish it need not happened in my time." Gandalf replies, "So do I, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." So as we come to it, may we find the courage and heart, the spiritual grounding needed to face our times as we link together in love and determination to save our precious earth.